So the European Commission is behind in making regulations for driverless cars, at least according to an article that was published today on Politico Europe. So according to these articles, by European regulations, driverless cars are only allowed 10 kilometers per hour speed, which makes them totally uncompetitive. And moreover, you need an internet speed of 500 megabits per second to have connected traffic on the road, and the Commission plan is only to have 30 megabits per second until 2020 for every European. So, and according to this article, there are member states that now start their own regulations in order to bring forward this industry of driverless cars, which of course leads to a fragmented market. So what is my take on this? Well, first of all, I have to admit, I do not know anything about the technology. I don't know how driverless cars work, and is that a problem? Well, not necessarily. What I do know is that we need common regulation. We need it to avoid a fragmented market, because if we have a fragmented market, then companies will say, before I start investing in the European Union, and when I have to deal with 28 different regulations, they're gonna say, okay, then I'd rather go to the US. Almost equally big market and one regulatory scheme. That's the first thing why we need common regulation. The second thing is that we need it for safety. I mean, there has to be some common standard so that you can trust wherever in the European Union you buy your driverless car in the future, it's going to be equally safe. So this is my take on the driverless car thing in general. Then my take on the fast internet. We might need it for driverless cars, at least according to this article that I read. But we need it in general, because if we do not have fast internet, companies will not invest. They will say we need a lot of data to send between our branches or to send to our factories. And if we have slow internet, well, then we are going to invest elsewhere. Now, I do understand that in Europe that's a bit difficult, because we have some underdeveloped areas in Europe that are far poorer than in other developed parts of the world, or poorer than the US, or poorer than in Japan. Okay, but does that mean that it has to be necessarily those with the slowest internet? No, because if you look at Europe, you will find that among the top 10 countries with the fastest internet in the world, Latvia is in fact number 6, and Latvia is one of the poorer members of the EU. It's the poorest probably of the Eurozone, and yet it's number 6 at 18.3 megabits per second. So this is according to the website State of the Internet. And when you look at this top 10 list, you will find some European and some EU countries in that list, in the top 10. So you find Norway, you find Sweden, you find Switzerland, you find Finland. So Latvia, of course, what do they all have in common? They all have in common that they are relatively small. However, there are also two big countries there in the list, Japan and South Korea. South Korea is in fact leading by a large margin. So there we have big countries, or relatively big countries with big markets, and they have the fastest internet, which makes them very attractive for all kinds of tech companies and in general companies. Now, what we have to do is go ahead. I want the European Union to be leading that list. It's very important, and we have to have funding for that. And of course, the European Union doesn't have enough funding in general, but this is an example where it doesn't have enough funding. If the member states can't get it done, or not all of them, the EU has to step in, and we really have to take the lead there. And this is something I want to say in general about technological development. The thing is, they come. So, you can't disinvent something, and you can't people stop from inventing things. However, you can make it favorable, and you can, for them, you can create an innovative climate where they will innovate more. And if that's in your own country, if your own country or your own continent in this case is leading in innovation, that means you reap the fruit of innovation, and that means you are making the regulations, you are setting the standards, and that means that you can control your own destiny. So, do we want to control our own destiny? Do we want to go ahead, be at the global vanguard of technological development, or do we just try to slow it down, and then when we see that we can't do it, then we sort of crawl behind? Uh, this is not what we should do, and it's neither in the internet, but it's also when you look at other technologies. And in biotechnology, Europe is really falling behind. There are other technologies where Europe has to be at the forefront, like nanotechnology, renewable energy, quantum computing. There are all these kinds of things that give us staggering new possibilities in the future, and that will give us so much more choice uh, in the future. There are so many applications that you could imagine, and Europe is not leading, or some European countries are at the lead, but not all of them, and there is a massive potential that we have to exploit, in my opinion. And now some people will say, no, but actually, technology, they bring only harm, and let's and they are soulless and they are capitalistic, and let's let's stick to tradition. But the thing is, we now, thanks to technology, live longer and healthier than ever before. We have more choices to make in our lives than ever before. If you don't want them, you don't have to make them. And I think that's clearly worth it. So I want the European Union being number one leader in technology and innovation.